and this session is being recorded. So I'd like to say welcome, first of all, to everybody in the audience, like I said before, and also welcome to Nelson. Nelson Sivalingam, the CEO at HowNow. Nelson, delighted to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here and great to virtually meet you all, and great to see so many people from so many different parts of the world. And before I tell you a bit more about who I am, I'd love to kick off with a small question. Given you've come here today to hear my eulogy about the LMS, I'd love to know, if you do have an LMS, how many of you love your LMS? You'll see a poll on your screen. The options are completely, mostly, partly, not at all. Let us know, how much do you love your LMS?
And that poll is now open, and I can see we've already had. Okay, so there's already 25, nearly 30. We had 30 people who have answered the poll already so far, so this is good. Interesting to see the results. We will broadcast the results afterwards, so you'll be able to see. Interesting to see where they are. Interesting to see how many people say completely, Nelson. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Just how many people saying completely so far. We'll give you another few seconds just to.
And those of you who are sharing partly, I'd love to know in the chat which part. Why? What stopped you from saying not at all? Not at all.
Absolutely. You can either put that in the discussion part of the poll, or you can put it in the chat. Either or. If you want to put it in the chat, that's fine. What do you love about it, and what have you fallen out of love with your LMS? We're really interested.
Absolutely. Yeah, same for the not at all. It'd be great to know what is it not doing for you. And those who've said mostly, I've got to say that's the most positivity I've heard around the LMS. And we ask this question every time we meet L&D professionals, and it's not often. I think I did it in a room full of 150 people, and one person put their hand up to say they love their LMS. So do share your thoughts on the why behind your answer.
So let's have it. I'm going to close the poll down now because 78% of the people have said. I'm going to end the poll, and let's just put the results up. So hopefully you can see the results, everybody. And I'm very interesting that no one says completely, Nelson. Why is that, do we think?
Yeah. Well, it's quite a common one. I guess the major takeaway here is almost 70% of you are not that happy with your LMS. And this is quite common. Like I said, we asked this question to many L&D teams and L&D professionals. And so the question is, given most of us are quite unhappy with the LMS and have been for a while, why do people keep sticking with their LMS or buying another LMS? And I'm going to tell you a little secret for why that happens. It's because most of us hate change. Even the people who say they like change, they're lying to you. They hate change. But there is one thing that can make us change even when we don't like change. And that's a big, undeniable, relevant change that makes the current status quo unacceptable. When that happens, that's when we're willing to change, because that big, relevant, undeniable change makes the current status quo unacceptable, because it either puts you at threat or it brings about an opportunity that you would miss if you don't change. And that's exactly what I'm going to tell you is currently happening in the world. We're seeing a big, undeniable, relevant change that has made the LMS redundant. And if we don't do something about it, we're going to put the organization and the people who work in that organization at risk. So before I tell you what that change is, I'm going to quickly tell you who I am. So I'm Nelson Sivalingam. I'm one of the founders and the CEO at HowNow. HowNow is a learning experience platform that's used by a high-growth company and global enterprises to essentially identify skills gaps and deliver relevant learning that helps people build the skills they need in the flow of work. I'm also the author of a book called Learning at Speed. And what Learning at Speed does, it's a collection of mental models and frameworks and a practical guide to how you can accelerate the speed at which you deliver and apply learning within your organization. The idea is not to give you more theory and academic material, but it really is a step-by-step guide on how you can increase the speed at which your organization learns and how you can improve business performance. I'm also the co-host of L&D Disrupt, It's where we bring in disruptive thinkers from the world of L&D to share their best practices, their insights, their learnings, and we have some incredible conversations. And so do check it out. You can listen to L&D Disrupt on your favorite podcast apps. Now you've heard me, let's move on to talking about what that big, undeniable, relevant change is. Something weird is happening in the world right now. Now, typically, when there's an economic downturn, and I think we can all agree, even if we can't agree that we're in a recession or not in a recession, we can probably all agree that the economy is tightening. And we can see this with what's happening around us in the world. Now, typically, when the economy tightens and you see a downturn, the unemployment rates go high, right? Because companies have got less money, they can hire less people, we see more redundancies, etc. Now, although we've seen redundancies and layoffs, what we're actually seeing is the unemployment rates are actually low. They're the lowest they've been in nearly 50 years when you look across the world. So what's happening there? Why is the unemployment rate still low, although we're heading into an economic downturn? Now, when you look at the statistics, what we're seeing, the US labor market recently reported that there are 6 open roles for every person who's qualified to do the job. Now, what that explicitly demonstrates is that we have a skills gap that's widening. And when you combine this with the fact that 78% of companies have reported that they've lost their talent because of a lack of growth opportunities. Now, when you combine that, you start to see a narrative form. There's so much job opportunity out there for people with the relevant skills, and companies who are not supporting their people to grow, the employees essentially have so much opportunity, they're essentially saying, I'll keep looking until I find the company that's going to help me grow in my career. Now, the combination of a competitive job market and the lack of growth opportunities within organizations means we're starting to see a talent shortage. Now, this isn't surprising given a recent Glassdoor survey found that 45% of employees reported a lack of growth was the top reason for a lack of satisfaction in their job. Now, this brings us to our problem. This big shift that we're seeing in the world means our biggest issue isn't AI or robots taking all the jobs. It's that we don't have enough skilled humans to take the jobs that are available. So we're seeing the consequences of a skill shortage in the world. Now, what does that mean for your organization? That means it's going to become very, very challenging as an organization to have the necessary skills to get work done, to be able to innovate in your product, to be able to meet the demands of your customer, to simply implement your strategy and get work done. It's going to be a struggle to get those skills because it's going to be very competitive to hire for those skills. Now, what's the risk of this? Why is the current status quo unacceptable? Because you would essentially end up losing money. You'll lose money in high replacement costs because your people are going to leave to look for organizations that are going to better support their growth. Now, just think about that cost of inaction. How much money it costs to, let's take a salesperson who's hitting their quota, who all of a sudden leaves because of a lack of growth. You now have got the time it's going to take you, let's say 3 months to replace that salesperson. And then you've got 3 months to, let's say, in best case, to ramp that person up. That's 6 months of having someone who's not hitting their quota. And that's a significant cost to the organization. You end up with having failed projects, unhappy customers, and missed revenues. The cost of inaction can be fatal, and we've seen this over the last couple of years. Now, what's the antidote to this? The antidote is today, the companies who are going to win the talent war, they're the companies who are able to help their people build the skills that matter in the shortest time. That's the only way for us to bridge the skills gap and make sure we retain our top talent. Now, how do we do this? To be able to build the skills that matter, we need people to engage in learning. Let's work backwards. To support people in their growth opportunities, we need them to build the skills they need to grow in their career. And in order for them to build the skills they need to first engage in relevant learning. Now, this is where we see one of the biggest barriers to L&D success. It's what we call the engagement gap. Now, the chances are you've probably experienced the engagement gap at some point. If you've ever been in a position where you've had a manager come to you and they've asked you, I think we need training program X, then if you've reacted to that by going away, trying to author a course or create a training program or procure a training program, you spend months and months trying to create the most perfect training program. You've gone through so many revisions that you've convinced yourself that you've built the most amazing training program, workbooks included. Then one fine day, you decide to push this out to everyone. And on that fine day, you realize a lot of people don't engage. Some people do. And even the some people who do engage don't actually complete the training program. If you've ever been in that position, and do let me know in the chat if you've ever experienced that, you would have experienced the engagement gap. The engagement gap is when you put out learning experiences out there, but people don't engage, and that becomes your biggest blocker. Now, if you've ever experienced that, you're not alone. In fact, most L&D professionals and L&D teams have experienced the engagement gap. If you look at a recent survey, they found there was only 3 to 6% average completion rate on courses and content libraries that companies had purchased. In 2020 and 2021, when they surveyed, they found 75% of employees were dissatisfied with their company's L&D function. They also found 88% of employees reported not applying what they learned. Let's flip that around. Only 12% of people said they applied the skills they got from what they learned. Now, given a couple of years back, I think the 2021 data shows that we spent over 360 billion on L&D globally. What that tells you is we're spending a lot of money on L&D, but actually not delivering a lot of value and struggling from engaging employees. Now, why does that happen? The common misconception we have is when people don't engage with our learning, we assume it's a content problem. So year after year, what we see organizations do is they invest in more quote unquote fun and interactive content, just to find out that actually the fun and interactive content didn't solve the problem. It didn't engage people. And the problem is, because we're so content focused, the question that we ask is, what content do people need and how do I get this content to them? What we don't think enough about is the context. Content without context feels like an unwanted interruption because it doesn't take into account what's the problem we're trying to solve. When do they need this problem solved? When do they need this relevant learning? How do we get it to them in the flow of work? I see there are a few questions about the data. You can see the source. More than happy to follow up with links to this, and we can include it in the email that goes out so you've got access to that data. So the challenge is, the reason why we're seeing the engagement gap is because of a content-first approach. Instead, what we need to do is we need to shift to a skills-first approach to L&D. We need to be asking ourselves not what content do they need and how do we get this content to them. What we instead need to do is think about what skills do people need and how do we help them build the skills they need. Now, when you ask that question and you put skills at the heart of how you think about L&D strategy, that changes everything. What you end up doing is you end up speaking a common language that the business understands. The C-suite understand when you talk about skills. They understand that what skills they don't have and what skills they need to build. Employees understand skills. They understand if they don't have a skill and if there's a skill they need to build. However, when we talk about content and language related to content, like content completion, time spent learning, this is not a language that connects with the rest of the business. And so when you shift to a skills-first approach, it changes everything. It changes the way you're understood and the way you speak to the organization. Now, what does it change? It changes fundamental aspects of how we think about our strategy. Instead of reacting to content needs, I'm sure many of you, and do let me know in the chat, how many of you have done a training needs analysis or a learning content needs analysis? Now, typically what we're asking them for is, what content do you need? And we're reacting to the content needs rather than proactively identifying what skills people need. So when you take a skills first approach, what you're doing instead is you're constantly measuring skills in your organization, and you're identifying proactively what are the skills gaps and what are the skills that people need, rather than sending out surveys to ask what content people need, right? So you're constantly measuring and tracking what are the skills gaps within your organization. Now, there are different ways of doing this. To give you an example, our customers use HowNow's built-in skills measurement tool, which works as a 360 feedback loop. So based on a 5-level proficiency scale, we combine a self-assessment, a peer assessment, and a manager assessment to give you an average proficiency score for every skill you have. Now, it's deliberately designed to be light touch, so you can run a continuous check-in to measure what skills you have and don't have, and essentially identify those gaps and tie the learning that you're doing to the skills gaps. So that's the first thing that changes when you take a skills first approach. The second thing that changes, it changes our approach towards content. Rather than focusing on buying the largest content library in the world or building content repositories and authoring courses, what we do instead is we think about creating learning ecosystems. Now, I want you to take a moment to think about, when was the last time you learned something that had a big impact on your performance and career? Have a think about that. And I want you to let me know in the chat if that learning took place inside your LMS. I'm going to give you a moment to put that in the chat. Let me know if it took place in an LMS. Now, most often...
Sorry, Nelson, I was going to say, we'll just give that pause for a second and give people an opportunity to answer that, because I think that's a really interesting question. And the fact that you've put those 5 elements there, I'd be interested to find out where people have learned. So the biggest thing recently. So the question was, what's the biggest thing recently that you've learned, and where did you learn it? And let's have a look. Claire says that no, it wasn't in the LMS, but yeah, let's find out. What's the things that you learned, and where did you the most impactful things, and where was it?
And do let us know if it was a blog. Let us know if it's a podcast, or did you learn from a colleague, or did you learn from a webinar, or did you learn from a book? Let us know how you learned that.
Kevin slightly meta talking about learning from the LMS about how to use the LMS. So I think that is a bit of a cheat, Kevin. I get that one. The informal one, Anthony, I think that's really interesting. In an office, an informal bottom-up approach. So I think that's interesting. We've also got in-person training, leadership training from Rebecca, and also a course by Jill or Gil as well. And Rachel's was a podcast, external online.
I love Lisa's one, trial and error of parenting teens.
Yeah. TV shows. Great. Yeah, it's interesting to see how aware these things are. And so even, there's probably, even more content that sits outside the 5 that you've got there, which are, the podcast and the personal social things around some of this stuff.
Absolutely. And the irony is we're all probably on this webinar, I'm assuming we're all in L&D in some shape or form. Yet the irony is that at some point in our careers, we've probably all procured a LMS, or we've probably recently done one, or we're about to do one. Yet, even when you reflect on your own learning, you realize most of the learning you do doesn't take place in the LMS. So there's 2 things we can learn from the little research that we did there. The first one is not all the learning people do happens in the LMS, because the LMS doesn't have all of the resources and content we learn from. That's the first thing we can take away from this. The second thing we can take away is learning happens with or without L&D. Now, that doesn't mean we have a career crisis and we go, oh my God, I've got to change my career because people don't need L&D. It's actually the opposite, right? Today, because you've got such a vast and diverse learning ecosystem, more than ever before, L&D's role is critical in reducing the friction for you to find the relevant learning within your ecosystem. I often say a good way of thinking about it is it's a bit like the conductor of an orchestra, where it's one of the most visible roles in the world. Yet, if you ask most people, what does a conductor do? And can the musicians not play without a conductor? Most people don't know what the role's there for. Of course, the musicians can play without the conductor, but the conductor is there to make sure the musicians and the orchestra are playing in harmony, in sync, on time. And think of the L&D professional here as almost a conductor of the L&D ecosystem, right? You're curating bringing that ecosystem together and reducing the friction. So think of yourselves as the conductor. And a skills-first approach, the focus is not about creating content, because it's not possible for you to create all of the content that's required to help someone build the skills they need to perform better and grow in their career. Instead, we need to shift our focus to bringing that ecosystem together and reducing the friction for people to be able to discover the learning they need, regardless of where it lives within that learning ecosystem. So this is a second way in which a skills-first approach to L&D changes how you think about content. Now, the third thing that changes is the way we deliver our learning experiences changes. Rather than a one-size-fits approach where we're pushing content out to the largest audience possible, rather than only delivering content within a LMS or within a virtual classroom or an in-person classroom, instead, what we change is we focus on delivering relevant learning at the moment of need. Now, why do we do that? It's because people are most motivated to learn and build the skills they need at the moment of need. There's no point teaching someone. There's no point teaching someone how to do a VLOOKUP 3 months before they've logged into Excel, versus teaching someone how to do a VLOOKUP whilst they're in Excel and they're in that moment of need and need help with doing that. That's when they're most motivated to engage with that learning. They're more likely to apply that learning. And when they apply that learning, it creates a positive feedback loop that essentially keeps them coming back. And the positive feedback loop is absolutely critical for building a continuous learning culture, because that's the thing that keeps you going back and reinforces that engaging with workplace learning actually does create a positive impact in my performance and consequently in my career. And often the traditional content first approach, because it's so focused on pushing content out and making sure you completed that content and making sure you spend time on that content, often we don't get a chance to create that positive feedback loop within the organization. So what does it look like if you were to deliver one-to-one learning in the flow of work? It essentially means you're now tailoring learning to skills gaps, not to content needs. You're now targeting people relevant learning based on their competency or proficiency in a particular skill. And rather than them having to switch context, you're now delivering access to this learning directly within the applications where they work. So to give you an example, we have organizations who use HowNow directly within Slack and Teams, but also within Salesforce, Intercom, etc. And even Google Search. One of the integrations where we get the most amount of engagement is HowNow is integrated with Google Search Engine. Now, what that means is, if your default behavior for employees is to go to Google to search for stuff, that's fine. Rather than forcing them to search in your learning platform, instead, what we need to do is take the learning where they are and embed it in that search. So the next time they search on Google, not only are they seeing results from the World Wide Web, but they're also seeing relevant results from the learning ecosystem that you've spent time and effort curating. And that delivery allows you to build in-demand skills on demand by delivering that relevant learning in the flow of work. And the last one, it changes the way that we measure impact. When we take a content-first approach, our focus is on, did you complete the content? How much time did you spend on content? I'm sure many of us on this webinar have spent time essentially reporting on content progress and content completion. But the reality is the business doesn't care how much content you've completed. The business doesn't care how much time you spent learning. What they want to know is it helping you build the skills that the business needs? Is it helping you build the skills you need to perform better? And so what we need to shift towards is, rather than an LMS that looks at just content related data, we need a dashboard that shows us a complete picture of how someone's learning. You know, many of you mentioned joining webinars and listening to podcasts and reading blogs. None of that learning right now on a traditional LMS is tracked. So actually, when you say you're reporting on an employee's learning, you're reporting on something very incomplete, because you're only reporting typically on what they've done in terms of e-learning and whether they've attended a training program or not. You're not getting a complete visibility of what knowledge they're sharing, because the chances are that knowledge is right now being shared on tools like Slack and Teams. So it's not easy for you to be able to report on a complete view of the learning and development that's happening within the organization. Now let's bring that together. On the single slide here, you'll see a comparison of how the entire approach to how we think about learning and development changes when we shift from a content first to a skills first approach to L&D. I'm just going to pause there just in case typically you wanted to get a snapshot of this. Of course, you can watch back the recording, but it mapped out that entire end-to-end experience that I just spoke about and how it fundamentally changes from content first approach to a skills first approach to L&D. Now, what does that mean? It means the end result is, rather than learning feeling like a unwanted interruption from work, it helps you make learning, meaningful learning, a part of everyday work. It's meaningful because it's personalized to the skills that I need to build to perform better and grow in my career. It's learning, not training, right? We're not just talking about training courses and training programs. As we discussed earlier, we're talking about blogs, podcasts, ebooks, webinars, learning from colleagues. So it's a broader learning ecosystem. We're talking about it being a part of. It needs to be an integrated part of the flow of work rather than being a disconnected and it requiring switching of context. It needs to be every day. It's not an ad hoc event. It's a part of continuous learning and it's connected to work. That's one of the significant differences between workplace learning and academic education at college, school, or university. Is often when we learn at school and college or university, we don't have the immediate context to be able to apply what we've learned. Often we're learning things that we're going to apply or supposedly apply further down the line. You know, anyone who's done trigonometry or Pythagoras theorem, you know, we were learning these things without knowing how we're going to apply it. But with workplace learning, it's different. You have the context there to be able to immediately transfer what you learn, apply it, and get that feedback loop. And that's why it's important you're building the skills that matter. Now, let's come back to the LMS. And why is it dead? Well, the LMS was built for content first, based on a content first approach, right? You know, for the last 2 decades, really, the LMS's role has been to store content, often e-learning content, or any of your scheduling that you might do for training programs and in-person or virtual events, and about distributing that content and tracking whether people have completed that content or not. It wasn't built for what we need today, which is to shift towards a skills-first approach to L&D. It can't do that because often your traditional LMS isn't helping you measure and identify skills gaps. Right? It doesn't tell you these are the gaps and these are the people with the gaps, and this is where you need to focus your effort. You can't find all of your learning and knowledge in one place. As we said, no one in the chat said they had their most important recent learning moment inside an LMS, because the things they're learning from, they can't find in their LMS. And also, the learning that we see inside an LMS isn't personalized to my context of where I am, what am I working on, what are the skills that I need right now to do my job better. And this is why the LMS has had its time, but what we need now is a new tech stack tailored towards delivering a skills first approach to L&D. Now, what does that look like? You need a learning platform that's essentially integrated with the rest of your HR tech stack. Learning shouldn't be siloed. It needs to be deeply integrated with the rest of your employee experience. So you need it to be able to connect with your HR system, with your performance management system, so you can pull in that data and use that data to better personalize relevant learning in the flow of work. You need something that's going to bring your entire learning ecosystem together and map that learning ecosystem based on your skills framework. You need it to be able to connect people with the relevant learning from their ecosystem based on the skills gaps that you've identified. And you need to be able to deliver this learning in the flow of work without people having to switch context. You need them to be able to, at that moment of need, access relevant learning. Even better, if you have a smart platform that can use the data, and let's take this into account with AI right now, what we're able to do is the best kind of search is no search. With AI, we're able to use data about talent and context to be able to predict what might be the most relevant learning for you based on who you are, where you are, and what your moment of need is. And we need a way of demonstrating impact. Talking about content and content analytics is not enough anymore, because the business wants to know, are you helping me build the skills for us to be able to perform better? And that means you need a one-stop shop for L&D reporting that essentially gives you reporting on leading indicators like engagement. These are the things that you're probably already tracking, like open rates, enrollments, etc. But it takes all the way from engagement all the way down to impact. Are we building the skills that the business needs? And that's what we need to be moving towards. Often people ask me the question of a learning experience platform, can it do compliance? Absolutely, right? What we're talking about with a learning experience platform is it's built with the learner and the learner's needs at the heart of it, rather than where a learning management system was built with the needs of the administrator at the heart of it. It was based on, can you store and administer learning content? Now, that's an overview of how you can look at bringing in a skills-first approach to L&D. We have recently published a white paper where we've collected research from a range of different organizations, best practices of how they've essentially shifted away from a content-first to a skills-first approach to L&D. It's a step-by-step guide on how you can take your organization on that journey. Feel free to scan the QR code. The link is also in the wrap-up, and you can see it on the screen. I'll jump to some of the questions. Keep them coming in the chat or in the questions section.
We've had a few interesting questions, Nelson. So I wanted to pick up a couple that have come through particularly. There was the one which you've identified already to do with the link to the Harvard resources and stuff. So that would be excellent. Question from Edwin from earlier on. Great to understand what you mean by skill. And I think this is interesting because everyone uses the term, but not sure the industry has an agreement about what skill means in the context of work. So how are you describing skill?
Yeah, great question. And I typically talk about it in the context of three things that I'll touch on. The first one is proof of knowledge. I think it's important to understand the other parts so it's clear what skills isn't and is. So proof of knowledge is often what we commonly test for in workplace learning, right? So if you've ever had a test or an assessment in your organization, that's because you're trying to get evidence of proof of knowledge. That's someone, let's say, has watched a video of someone riding a bike. And if I ask them, what are the steps to riding a bike? They would be able to tell you. That's a proof of knowledge, right? They understand the facts. They understand the concepts behind riding a bike. Then you come to proof of skill. Now, proof of skill is, now that I've watched this video of riding a bike, can I actually get on that bike and ride it? It's the application of those facts, knowledge, concepts, the ability to be able to apply that and that creates a consequence is what the proof of skill is. So when I talk about skill, that's what I'm talking about. That's where it starts, is building that ability, that capability for you to be able to do X. And I'll talk about one more thing when we're kind of measuring impact, is the proof of performance. Now, proof of performance is, can I ride, I now know I can ride a bike, but the question is, can I ride a bike from London to Brighton, where the performance outcome is getting to Brighton, right? And so it's being able to apply that skill within a relevant work context that now gives you a business outcome when applied, right? And often we don't get to that point. We see many organizations that we've worked with where we've moved them from proof of knowledge, now they're also doing proof of skill. But what the bigger challenge that L&D often find themselves is, how do I generate that proof of performance? I mean, that's a whole another topic, but it's definitely doable. And we've seen this work with organizations where you need to work with the business to essentially get the metrics. Like, let's just say I'm trying to improve sales performance. It's making sure you have the data from the get-go. What's the baseline? What's our sales conversion today? Okay, it's 20%. What's our target? Where do we want to get to? We want to get to a 30% sales conversion. What you need to start to see is, are we moving in the direction of that desired outcome towards 30%? Now, you might ask me, well, Nelson, just because we're moving in the direction of 30%, it doesn't mean the learning is working, right? Well, there's a way of doing that through qualitative analysis, where you now interview the beneficiaries, interview the business. And if they're starting to, in their narrative back to you saying, I've been able to see a performance improvement because of the learning I did, that gives you the qualitative data to be able to form that impact narrative. So hopefully that makes it clear in terms of what I talk about when I talk about skills.
Well, Edwin has come back and said that's a great answer. So there you go.
Thank you.
That's useful. There was also an interesting comment from Martin. He didn't pose it as a question, but actually I think that there is a question that sits around it, which is find some employees who go off and study subjects that aren't relevant to their work or the opportunities available, which is one reason they can't apply it. So they just go off and learn stuff that isn't relevant to the job that they do. Can you speak to that a little bit, Nelson?
Yeah, absolutely. So my take on this is we shouldn't penalize people just because we think they're not learning something that seems quite obvious. The fact that that behavior exists and there's the mindset to learn should be encouraged, whether you can see how it connects back to work or not. As Steve Jobs famously said, you can only connect the dots looking back. Right. And so just having that culture and behavior of learning is good. Now, if you want them to spend that time to learn more relevant things that are tied to business performance, that comes back to you really clearly communicating the why, right? Often what we say is you need to learn this because you have to, because the sales team has said that your manager has said you need to learn this, but we don't spend as much time to deeply communicate what's the why, what's in it for me. Right. And this is where it does help for L&D professionals to think like marketeers or founders of your own business, where what is the value proposition for both the business and the employee? Right. And a great way of doing that is to think about what does the finish line look like? What does the finish line look like for this employee? Right. Does it look like, well, if you're winning more deals, you're going to earn more commission? Is that what the finish line looks like? It's painting the picture of once I've gone on this run and I get to that end finish line, it's painting that picture, getting them to visualize that. And often I've seen this happen with organizations where we don't spend enough time on that. We don't do a good job of communicating the value that's in for the employee. So I think to get them to do more stuff aligned to the business and work, it's communicate why they should, what's in it for them.
Awesome. And Kevin's picked up on that. Yeah, what's in it for me? A favourite question. I don't think we ask often enough. So he appreciates that as well. There's an interesting question here from Lee that actually he asked in the chat of everybody in the chat, but actually, again, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. And there's a follow-up to this that I'd like to ask as well. Often the default go-to option for a learner is to ask for a call. So shifting their mindset and that of the organisation to be more self-directed and in the flow of work is a bit of a mindset change. Have people been on this journey and how do you get on? So I'm interested in your thoughts of that, Nelson. How do people react and how do you find people react when they just go, there you go, off you go, available to you? How do you approach that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great question because this is a mindset change, not just for L&D, HR, and it's actually a mindset shift even for the employees, because I've seen this happen where people only feel like they've been doing learning if they've gone to a course, right? And so if you've been curating blogs and podcasts and facilitating informal learning, they don't necessarily consider that as learning that's been happening, because we've been so much conditioning has happened over the years that unless you're in a classroom or lecture hall or you're at a workshop or you're away from work, it's not learning and it's not training. And so that mindset shift, a great way to accelerate it, you need to get your people managers on side. If they recognize that and value that as learning, it changes the perception. The problem is right now, we value you going on a course and getting a certificate. We value getting what do you call it, CPD credits and points and etc. We value formal qualifications more, and that's because we've been conditioned since we were kids. Right? We've been conditioned to think the only kind of learning is really when you go to college or university, etc. And so that cultural change comes from, I think, managers are the key players in this, and to get them to value it, and also organizational influencers. Now, you don't have to be a senior person to have influence in your organization. I'm sure we all know who the influencers are within our organization. The people who, popular at socials. They're the ones who are already posting on LinkedIn. They're always the people who answer the questions when someone asks something on Slack or Teams. I would identify those influencers and use them as a way of recognizing and valuing the non-traditional learning that they're doing and getting them to endorse that. So it is, the simple answer is it's a change of perception. And we
Yeah.
do need the right people to help us change that perception within the organization.
I think that there's another question that comes off of that, Nelson, which I'd be keen in, and I think it's probably relevant for the audience as well. So apologies, everybody, but I'm going to ask a question, which is to do with how do you work with your stakeholders who have only ever seen you deliver courses, have only ever seen you deliver classes, have only ever seen you deliver workshops. And now if you're saying we're going to do something a bit different, how do you deal with the challenge you will get from the people who actually do have the power, the control, the budget, and so on? How do you deal with that kind of relationship with those stakeholders?
Yeah, I'd break that down into a couple of things. I think the first thing is I often say, love the problem, not the solution, right? Because the problem is what you have in common with the rest of the business. The solution isn't. The solution is something you bring to the table. But what we're all connecting over, you, the stakeholders, are connecting over the problem that we need to solve. We can all agree, actually, AI is disrupting a lot of industries. We need generative AI as a skill. We need our people to be more informed around generative AI. Let's just say, play that as an example. That is a problem that your stakeholders can identify and connect with. What we need to sell to them is, look, what you're asking for is not a training program. What you're asking me for is to help you solve this problem. And to do that, I need to do ABC, right? It's taking them, making them realize that what we're invested in is solving the problem. We're not invested in delivering a training program. So I'm getting everyone aligned. And often the reason why this doesn't happen is we don't spend enough time up front defining and articulating the problem in a way where we get buy-in. Right? We rush towards getting outputs out because it's this conditioning again of my boss is going to ask me how much work I've done. And the more courses I've authored, the more work it seems like I've done. And, that's because the management team is asking the wrong question, right? They should be asking, have we got the outcome that we were looking for? Another one I recommend, especially when you're going on a journey of moving away from a traditional concept first approach to skills first, is how you communicate the business case. We have a framework for this. Do reach out, happy to share it. But it's, in essence, we use the 3 whys. The first why is essentially why now, right? You need to be able to articulate, why do we have to change the way we're doing things right now? And go back to what I mentioned at the beginning. You need to articulate what is the big, undeniable, relevant change that makes the current approach unacceptable. What is the threat of sticking with the current approach? So that's the first thing you need to articulate, is why now. The second thing you need to articulate is why your solution, right? Is what is the obstacle that you currently have that is stopping you from addressing the threat that you mentioned at the beginning, right? And now, how does your solution, now that could be a program, it could be blogs, it could be whatever that solution is, how does that solution help you overcome that obstacle? And the third why is why not? Now, no business case is watertight until you have thought about all the reasons why your stakeholders might challenge you. Now, it might sound counterintuitive to think about the weaknesses in your own business case, but actually it comes across a lot stronger when your stakeholders know that you've already thought about where the gaps are in your business case. So think about why not. What are the questions that they're going to be concerned about? Are they going to be concerned about things like the fear of messing up? Like, do we have the right people to be able to engage in this? Answer that question. What if we bring in a new platform and no one uses it? What are you going to do about that? Address that question. So I think a strong business case is answering those 3 questions: why now, why your solution, and why not? And that helps people, helps bring your stakeholders on that journey. Hopefully that helps.
Awesome. So following on from that, there's a question from Barry, because what we're doing is effectively we're repositioning how learning development does its job. We're repositioning what learning development does. And Barry's asking, so what will the subject matter expert of the future look and feel like? Because fundamentally their job is going to change, isn't it?
In what way? Like, it'd be in terms of the subject matter experts within the organization that we work with and how involved they are.
I think that's where the question's coming from Barry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if today you're still trying to, if we're still dependent on L&D to create and procure all of the expertise that the organization needs, you're going to fall behind because there's no scalable way. And it also comes from a outlook where we think L&D is a function, but actually L&D is a company-wide capability. It's everyone's job, right? It's not just L&D are there to enable and reduce the friction, but it's everyone's job. It's the people manager's job. It's the C-suite's job. It's the employee's job to own their own development and make sure they have the skills to do their job as well as they can. And so I think that mindset shift does change the role of the subject matter experts, because what we should be doing is empowering the subject matter experts more to not hoard their expertise, but instead to share their expertise and be valued and recognized for being an expert within their organization. So I think the sooner we can move to an environment where we give the tools to the experts to cut out the middle people, right? But right now, what we have is middle people who go to the expert, ask the questions, get the expertise, format that, author it, put it into a delivery format to get it out. There's too many middle people right now. And what we need to do is we need to go directly to the source. And that means cutting out all of those middle steps and empowering the expert to directly share with their peers. And that's how you build a community that's learning and sharing knowledge.
Yeah. It's the Jane Hart talks about the learning policing what happens, and actually we need to get out of the way, and just let that stuff happen. So I like that. Another question from Edwin. I like this one as well. So is the explosion of technology obscuring the fundamentals of learning and development? So is the technology, is it, like he says, obscuring the fundamentals of what of what learning development is really about?
Yeah, I'll go back to something I just said, which is love the problem, not the solution. And technology here is the solution, right? But you need to first be laser focused on what is the problem, and does the solution actually help me solve this problem or not? I think what we're guilty of doing is often getting excited by, which is fine. It's fine to get excited and curious about the latest gadget on the scene and to play around with it. But the case should never be, I want to use, let's just take the most recent phenomenon, right, of generative AI. It should never be, I want to use generative AI for the sake of using generative AI. And we see this often, where we now see, when we're speaking to organizations, L&D teams asking, I think I need a bit of AI in this. Why? What does it mean? Not to say you don't need AI, but it should never start with the solution, right? It's like going to your doctors and saying, I think I need this medication. Right? You've already diagnosed yourself and you've already found the solution without actually digging in deep into what the problem is. And so I do agree, technology and any other buzzword is sometimes guilty of obscuring that. And that means there's even more emphasis that we need to be disciplined to focus on the problem, to define the problem clearly, then seek a solution that's fit for solving that problem.
Excellent. Thank you, Nelson. I've put it onto the wrap up page because I can see there's a couple of people who have had to leave or are leaving and so on. So I can see our number of participants has dropped by a couple as well. So just so we've got the link there for the guide from HowNow, you can click on that link. You've also got Nelson's contact details through LinkedIn. You've got mine as well, and details of the recording will be on the digital hub. Like we said, that should be available from tomorrow. And we've also got the link in there for Nelson's book. So if you want to click on that, then that will take you through to Nelson's book as well. Just looking for any more questions. Just interesting conversation going on in there. The role of the manager came out in the chat as well. How do you think the role of the manager is going to change in this approach, Nelson?
I don't think the role of the manager has changed. I think we just need to get the managers doing what they needed to do. One of my favorite books is called High Output Management. And it's a famous one in the space of leadership and management. And, even in that, as far as back as I think it's a couple of decades ago, that book came out. But even then, learning and development was kind of talked about as a high leverage activity for managers. Right. As a manager, it can't be down to everything you do is down to one-to-one time. Right. There are certain things that you do that are high leverage activities that take the impact is a multiple X on the effort it took you to do. And learning and development is a high leverage activity. And I think it's just getting managers to think about that and also giving them the time and to think about that. I think often when I speak to managers, the challenge they have is they almost feel this pressure to just get work done. And so they feel like, look, most of my conversation on my one-to-ones is about getting the job done, but they don't appreciate the long-term advantage that you're building in the team by investing in the learning and development of individual. Again, it does come down to a mindset shift. It does come from the C-suite, the stakeholders, making it very clear what they value, and make it a part of how you measure performance in your organization.
Awesome stuff. Okay, so we're 5 minutes to the hour. I can see people saying thank you and having to drop off and so on. If we haven't got any more questions, it just leaves me to say thank you, Nelson. I really appreciate that. And I can see the audience as well. I've also been saying thank you, excellent session, and things like that as well. Really interesting, really useful as well, and appreciation. So thank you to our audience for your engagement. These sessions only work so well because people do engage with them, and so thank you for posing really difficult questions, because we like difficult questions. Thank you again, Nelson, for your time, and the links, as we say, on the left hand side. Download the guide, the link to Nelson's book, and Nelson's contact details are there. Like we say, the webinar recording will be available from tomorrow, and you'll receive an email which will have the details of that, and you'll also have the details of the link to the studies from the slide deck that we were talking about. Leaves me just to say we will see you again soon. We are scheduled to be delivering another 2 sessions in a couple of weeks' time. So thank you again, everybody. Thank you, Nelson. And thank you all. And hopefully we will see you again in a short while. I'm now going to put everybody else on hold, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you, everybody.